My husband confessed to a 7-month affair and called his honesty a gift, pretending to be noble so I would take him back. I am 33, I was married to my ex, 35, for 6 years, and we had been together 4 years before that, 10 years total, completely wasted on the filthy trash he is. This happened about 18 months ago, when the problem started gradually. He began lying to me with supposed last-minute things that came up and kept him late at work, helping a friend who had to rescue an injured kitten and it ran late. Well, that last part isn't true, but among so many lies there was surely one like that. One day in March of last year my ex came home early. I was making pasta in the kitchen when he walked in and sat at the table without greeting me. He looked serious and just sat there staring at his hands, which aren't interesting at all, because they were the hands he used to put on another woman's body. When I asked what was going on, he said he needed to talk. He had been seeing someone else, a legal assistant I'll call my ex's mistress who works in the office building next door. It had been 7 months, and he gave details I didn't ask for, like where they went for lunch and how many times a week they saw each other. He was being voluntarily honest because he could no longer live with the guilt, not because he felt good for me, and then to top off this act of idiocy he was proud of himself for being honest. The twisted reasoning was that most men would have kept lying, but he couldn't do that to me because he loved me. He even used the word respect for me. Sure, he was respecting me a lot while disrespecting his mistress in some random bed. He also mentioned that now that everything was on the table we could work on our marriage and make it stronger, more genuine, and best of all he had already ended things with the mistress that morning, so he was completely free to work on us. I told him we could work, but on the divorce, because I was not going to stay married to a failed attempt at a human being. I told him I would be going to my sister's house that night and for as many nights as necessary. He looked confused, as if he truly expected a different outcome, as if in his head there was a scene where I ran to hug and kiss him, telling him I loved him for being such a good husband, and he asked if we could talk first. I looked at him like I thought he was an idiot, which I did, honestly, and I left without answering. My younger sister, 29, lived across the city with her husband Tyler. When I arrived at her door that night she already had everything ready because I had updated her by phone before arriving. Tyler stayed in their bedroom to give us space. I went back to the apartment 2 days later when my ex was at work to pack everything I could fit in my car, clothes, books, my laptop, some kitchen utensils my grandmother had given me. I wasn't going to let the cheater eat with my grandmother's things, let him starve. If my grandmother were alive, she probably would have used them to cook and then, while still hot, thrown them at his head. My ex called me 17 times that day after noticing things were missing. I never answered. He sent messages saying we needed to talk like adults because, according to him, he had given me a beautiful gift, the gift of truth. I replied with a gift of my own, a photo of my middle finger raised. He kept writing that I was throwing away a decade over something he considered fixed. I blocked his number and stayed at my sister's place. A week later my parents got involved. My mother called and said she had spoken to my ex, asked about my grandmother's things, and was relieved after I told her I took everything. They are important family items. She said he was devastated, which was the least he should be after what he did. My father called separately and asked if I needed him to visit to have a father-in-law to son-in-law talk. It wasn't necessary, but I would keep it in mind. My ex's parents also called. His mother left a voicemail saying 7 months wasn't that big a deal, arguing that every marriage has ups and downs. His father emailed me with the subject, "Think this through," listing all the practical reasons divorce was a bad idea. Some were reasonable, though none would change my mind, like financial stability, shared assets, the embarrassment of telling the extended family, and others like that I wouldn't be able to find another man like him out there because the situation is hard for women. My father-in-law thought that having a good job and being attractive wasn't that common. My reply was, "Dear soon-to-be ex-father-in-law, I look forward to being able to call you ex-father-in-law shortly. As for your concern about not finding someone like my future ex, rest assured that if I go to the local landfill I can find items far superior, with the option to choose colors and sizes at will." With nothing further from me, I solemnly take my leave and wish you a lovely time having sexual relations with your mother. I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce. My ex did not contest it, which surprised me because he had been very pushy up to that point. The whole process took 4 months because we had to split everything. The apartment was in both our names, so we sold it and split the money in half. We divided our savings accounts and sent spreadsheets back and forth through our lawyers about who kept which furniture. I could have chosen to give up some things. But I wanted to be petty, even down to who got a thumbtack. When the divorce was finalized, I found a place for myself as far from where we used to live as possible, to put real distance between us. He no longer lived there, but I wanted as much distance from the area as I could get. I changed my number and only gave it to my sister, my parents, and a few close friends. Around the same time as my divorce, my father was diagnosed with leukemia. His doctor said treatment would take at least a year. It wasn't a pleasant time, even if I talk about it lightly now. Months passed and I got used to living alone. I worked, came home, watched TV, and went to bed. On weekends I went to art museums or read books in cafes. My sister came over for dinner once a week. I also visited my parents and cooked for them, because they already had enough to deal with my father's health issues. My life was quiet, illness aside. Then, about 4 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my ex's mother, crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said the trash had been in an accident and it was very bad. My ex had been driving home from work when a truck ran a red light. His car flipped. He was in the hospital's intensive care unit and in a coma. The doctors didn't know if he would wake up. To make the story even worse, before losing consciousness at the scene he had said my name. He was asking for me, because I was the only person he wanted. My response was simple. I'm not a doctor, and there was nothing I could do. If he was in a coma, he wouldn't even know I was there. So don't ever call me again to bother me. Then I hung up. After that I kept thinking about it and called a mutual friend to talk it over. He had no idea about any accident, but planned to go to the hospital to check on him. When he arrived and asked at reception, the clerk typed my ex's name into the computer. There was no patient by that name. She checked several times and found nothing. No one with that information had been admitted in the past week. My friend went to check other hospitals in the area, but again, no one with that name. I joked that I would have asked if there was a patient named Mr. Trash, but the result probably would have been the same. My friend then called my ex's mother. She told him she hoped I could go to the restaurant near the first hospital to get her message. He did, but I didn't. He went to see what all this was about. And I say, my friend, now, because after this I don't think we're still mutual. It was a small Italian place with tables outside. I got photos and a full play-by-play. There was a banner hanging from the ceiling that said, "Welcome home," and balloons tied to the chairs. A cake sat in the middle of the table with white frosting. My ex's parents were standing near the cake, and my ex was sitting at the head of the table, completely healthy, not a scratch on him. Everyone turned to look at my friend when he walked in, because they were expecting me. My ex stood up to ask why he was there and what had happened with me. His mother explained she had spoken to me. They explained that this was a test. If I ran to the hospital when I thought he was dying, it meant I still loved him. Sorry, I guess I failed. They all agreed this was the best way to show me that I belonged with my ex. But my friend had ruined it by going in my place. He should have convinced me to go, at least to the restaurant. My friend thought he'd entered the twilight zone, so he turned around and left. My ex asked if he was going to come get me, but got no answer. Not long after, I received all the details and photos of the ambush I didn't attend. 2 weeks later, someone rang my doorbell on a Saturday morning. I looked through the peephole and saw my in-laws standing there. I didn't open the door. They kept ringing. It was cold outside, especially if you stand there for 20 minutes. They started yelling that they knew I was there but didn't want to cause a scene, so it would be better if I opened the door. Damn car parked out front. I put on another voice and answered that they had the wrong house. They believed it, because they replied that they were looking for me and thought the voice was a roommate. My roommate, meaning me with cold symptoms, told them no one by that name lived there. They insisted they had the right address and expected to be let in to talk to me, because it was freezing outside. My roommate told them to leave or she would call the police, because she didn't know them or their intentions. They stood there for a while and then called the police themselves. When the officers arrived, they told them my roommate wasn't letting them see me. The response was that the police couldn't do anything. They kept insisting, and finally the officers agreed to knock on my door and ask what was going on. I still didn't want to come out or use my real voice so my in-laws wouldn't confirm I lived there. I don't know how they figured it out, but there they were. I put on my fake roommate voice again and told the officers I didn't know these people, that they'd been there a long time and wouldn't leave. In the end, the officers apologized to me and told them to leave, even though they kept shouting that I was inside. I don't know exactly why they came, but I can imagine it had to do with the big reconciliation with the pile of garbage they call a son. Which makes sense. 2 pieces of trash produced an even worse piece of trash. For now, I plan to perfect my fake voice and be very careful when I leave the house. I don't want any ambushes outside. Luckily, I have a neighbor with cameras who I exchanged numbers with for safety when I first moved in, and I plan to use him as my lookout. He's an older man who acts like the neighborhood cop, watching for anything suspicious. He actually worked as a police officer when he was younger, so some things are hard to leave behind. Update 1, neither you nor I expected things to calm down. They faked a serious accident where my ex supposedly had unusually high brain activity while in a coma, so I didn't expect a small setback like not finding me at home to stop them. After my in-laws left my house that day, I didn't hear from anyone for about a month. No calls, no messages, no one showing up at my door, no reports from my neighbor. It was the quietest month I'd had in years, which was both strange and suspicious. Then one night I received an email. It was from my ex. The subject line was just my name. I would have deleted it if I'd had anything more interesting to do. He wrote 4 paragraphs saying that what they did at the restaurant was wrong. He had convinced himself it was a good idea because there was no other way to reach me, that desperate times called for desperate measures. He wrote that he had destroyed the best thing in his life by cheating on me, and then destroyed what little was left by carrying out that little lie. Yes, he wrote, little lie. He wasn't asking me to forgive him or to reply. He said he was only writing because he owed me the truth. He always owes me the truth, but never manages to do the right thing, like not cheating and lying in the first place. He admitted it was his idea that he pushed on his parents. They had wanted to invite me to dinner just to talk, but he knew it wouldn't work. He was the one who suggested something more dramatic. He thought that if I imagined him in a vulnerable position, it would remind me of the good times. The last paragraph said he was moving for a new job and that he hoped I would find someone who treated me the way I deserved. The last line said he was sorry for everything. I read the email twice, because despite everything, it seemed like the most decent thing he'd done in a long time, and I couldn't believe it. I didn't respond, of course. A few weeks after that email, my sister texted me. The message said, "Taylor and I are separated. When you're free, call me, I need to talk." Since she had been such a huge support for me during my divorce, it was the first thing I did after reading her message. I called her, and she invited me over so we could talk more calmly, though she was clearly shaken for obvious reasons. A large part of the blame for their separation and upcoming divorce had to do with me. Taylor had been saying that my ex's attitude in confessing what he'd done wasn't that bad, and that he thought similarly to my ex, that it's hard to find a man who's honest. She hadn't told me before so I wouldn't have more to worry about, but she had finally discovered that it was Taylor who gave my address to my in-laws. So I kicked him out of where they lived about 20 minutes after he confessed. I could have done it faster, but first I needed to tell him a few things about what I thought of him. He had been out of the house for less than 2 hours. We talked until very late that night. There were other problems with them too. But all of his behavior in the past period made her think he could cheat on her, and giving out my address was the last straw. He even knew about the fake hospital call back in April. My father finished his last round of treatment, and the cancer went into remission. That was good news, among so much bad news this family has been getting lately. My sister waited for that moment to tell them she was getting divorced. As expected, they were angry with Taylor. Later that month, I was leaving my office building when I saw my ex's father outside. He was leaning against the wall. I stopped and considered going back inside, but he had already seen me. He said he wanted to apologize, that what they did was wrong and that he had been thinking about it for months. I asked him why he was telling me this, and he replied that it was because my ex had moved away and cut contact with them. My ex blamed them for ruining any chance of me ever speaking to him again. His wife was devastated because her son was not returning her calls. I didn't want to go to my car so he wouldn't know it was the same one that had been at the house that day, so I went back inside and waited for him to leave. Then I walked out, took a few turns in case he followed me, and finally went back to my car. What's strange about all this is that my ex wrote to me taking the blame, but according to his parents, he blamed them. My sister is asking for a divorce and they have already started the process. I don't think she'll be as lucky as I was with things being quick. Taylor is making it difficult, but my sister is ready to divorce. Our parents support her, and I'm there for her too. Update 2. My sister is already divorced, but she has also met someone new. His name is Pat, and she's brought him over for dinner a couple of times. He seems like a good man, because he agrees that Taylor and my ex were both idiots, an opinion shared by many of you here from what I've read in the comments. At the beginning of this month, something strange happened. I received a Facebook message from my ex's mistress, the legal assistant he had the affair with. I hadn't thought about her in over a year. The message said she had found out what happened at the restaurant. She said she wanted me to know that my ex had lied to her too. He had lied by saying that I was leaving him and that the marriage was already over when they started seeing each other. She didn't learn the truth until months after the affair ended. She felt terrible and wanted to apologize. I didn't respond to her message, but I didn't delete it either. I just left it in my inbox. Later that month, my ex's mother tried to add me on LinkedIn. I declined the request. 2 days later, she sent me a message on another platform before I could block her there too. She said something about praying for me and having the best intentions, that she just wanted to know how I was doing because she cared about me. I blocked her. My sister and Pat became serious quickly. He has moved into her apartment, which doesn't worry me, because she seems different with him. She's calmer and smiles much more than when she was with her ex, when supposedly everything was fine. One night when we had dinner at her place, I saw them cooking together in the kitchen. They moved around each other easily, like they'd been doing it for years. Pat asked me if I was seeing anyone, and I said no. He said that was fine, but if I wanted to try again, he had friends who might interest me. He didn't say it to pressure me, and he mentioned that it was fine if I took my time. It was only if I felt ready to meet someone, because he's very selective about who he chooses as friends. I wasn't ready yet, but his question made me think about it at least. My family and I spent Christmas together at my place. We cooked and watched bad Christmas movies. Pat was visiting his family in another state, so it was just us. My parents already know him and think he's a good guy. My father is a bit more cautious after everything that's happened to us, but I think he'll adopt Pat as a son soon enough. With my ex and Taylor, things never really clicked. They didn't get along badly, but there wasn't much in common, like there was a barrier there. With Pat, it's different. There's chemistry. Soon enough we'll probably see them hugging and having a beer together. Thankfully, my father is still in remission, and hopefully his next checkup will show everything continuing this way. In January my lease was ending, and I decided to look for an apartment, for safety. Somewhere in a better neighborhood. I liked the idea of living in a house, but it's a lot of maintenance, and it's hard to strain my throat to do another voice. Also, because my former in-laws wouldn't know that place. My sister helped me look at apartments. We found a one-bedroom with huge windows and a small balcony off the main bedroom. I signed so fast because I was afraid someone else would take it. Pat helped us move my furniture, and my sister went to buy food so we could have our first dinner in the new place. I don't know if it was because I was happy to share it with them or because I felt relieved or calm, but I told Pat to pick the best friend he had, because I was finally ready to go out with someone. He said he didn't even have to think about it, that he had the perfect person for me. We haven't had our first date yet, but we've been talking since Pat gave him my number. He seems nice, and from what Pat has told me about him, he sounds like a good man. In the end, it wasn't as hard as my in-laws tried to make it seem, although I don't want to rush anything until we've had our first date. Update 3. It has been 7 months since I moved into my new place. A few months ago my father had a health scare. He didn't come out of remission, but there was something strange in one of his tests and the doctor asked him to undergo more exams. Luckily, it turned out to be nothing, and we were only worried sick for a few days. As I anticipated in my previous post, my father and Pat ended up becoming great friends, and that's exactly what happened. My sister has started to joke about being jealous that her boyfriend spends so much time with her father. Even though she says it jokingly, I don't think our father is the best influence on Pat, who genuinely seems like a good man with no bad intentions. Our father, on the other hand, even though we love him dearly, can be a bit rough. He likes to insult people, while I've never heard Pat say a bad word. My sister hopes none of our father's bad habits rub off on him. I am officially dating Pat's friend. The first date was good, and many more followed after that. Pat has a kind of quality seal. When he says something is good and personally guarantees it, you know it really is. That started with his friend, but also applies to restaurants he recommends for our dates, and even random Amazon purchases. If Pat says it's good, you shut up and hand over the money. Clarification: there was no exchange of money for his friend. Recently, my sister and Pat got engaged. She called me immediately after he proposed, crying and laughing at the same time. She said it happened at the place where they had their first date. She already asked me to be her maid of honor, even though there's no date yet. I said yes. She's still in the planning stage, but the way she talks about it, it sounds like the wedding will be tomorrow. She said it would be small, maybe around 40 people. I already told her I'd need time to buy a dress, not that it could be the following week. Luckily, she's taking it calmly. She also needs to find her own dress, so when the wedding planning officially starts, we'll go hunting together. For now, all the preparations are unofficial. Now, about my ex and his crazy trash family. If you remember from my previous posts, my ex's mistress tried to contact me. She told me a few things, but I decided not to get involved in case it was some kind of game. It wasn't, but she didn't push me either, because she assumed I'd be angry with her. Besides telling me about my ex and how she was also cheated on, she wanted me to help her with a lawsuit against him. When my ex told me she worked in the office building near his job, he wasn't lying. He just forgot to mention some very important details. I found all of this out when I was subpoenaed to testify in the lawsuit brought by his mistress, whom I'll call Monica. When my ex broke up with her to give me that gift and work on our marriage, he made sure Monica could no longer work there. His new job opportunity and his move out of the city were not because of a career change, but because he was fired. My former in-laws being nice and apologetic was an attempt to keep me on their side so I wouldn't testify. Of course I testified with everything I knew. Even though I can't share details that would identify the case, part of my testimony was important for Monica's lawsuit against him. He won't get that job back, and although he has already found another one, Monica is suing him for a large amount of money. I've already given my testimony, and now Monica is waiting for the verdict. Maybe when that's over, I can give you an update on the consequences for my ex. The day I testified, he was there, along with his parents. It was uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to stop me from helping in any way necessary. My former in-laws are helping with their son's defense, which only makes me more interested in him losing, so they waste their money and my ex ends up owing an outrageous amount. That would be pretty poetic for that trash family. Edit: I can't give many details about the case, because if I do, it would be easy to look it up online. All I can say is that she was fired after my ex accused her to her employers with very serious lies. He did it to make sure she wouldn't be nearby in case I gave him another chance. Monica is also suing her employers for wrongful termination, but I know you care more about my ex, so I haven't focused on that. If Monica wins the case against my ex, she'll most likely win that one too. Update 4. I'm bringing you a final update, because many of you have been asking for it. Sorry if I didn't respond much, but I couldn't exactly go to the judge and ask them to hurry up with the verdict just because a group of gossipers, myself included, wanted to know what happened. My ex was found guilty and had to pay compensation of close to $250,000. That's not the exact number, but call me paranoid for not giving a more precise figure. Yes, it's 6 figures, and it could be a bit more or a bit less. Either way, it's an amount that seems enormous to me. I definitely wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of Monica's lawsuit. Just thinking about it makes my bank account hurt. Monica also won her lawsuit against her former employers. But karma didn't stop there, because my ex was fired from his current job as well. A friend of Monica called to report him and provided his new employer with details about his legal issues. She didn't do it anonymously. She gave all the information needed in case they wanted to follow up. Sometimes I'm sitting or lying down with nothing to do, and I start thinking about how his parents, or maybe just his father, said I'd never find someone like my ex out there. That makes me laugh like a maniac, because they were right. It would be very hard to find someone like my ex. Fortunately, I'm not looking.